Arm Layton, before we harmonize for the mailbag on Wednesday, September 4th, I want to do a quick shout out to our audience because you guys leave us questions for every Wednesday mailbag every other week. Sometimes we do it on Friday with the three of us, but this week it's Arm and I answering all of your questions from our Instagram and our Twitter. I am continually, every single time we post that, blown away by the amount of research that people are doing into their questions. They aren't just off the top. They aren't super simple. There's so much nuance to them. And they're asked so quickly, too. When we drop that, comments load in. And there are a couple of comments, questions left on our Instagram and Twitter that we're going to turn into entire episodes.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
were some questions that were literally too good for the mailbag.
Yeah.
So I just want to shout out our audience. I cannot thank you guys enough for being a part of this ever since Arm and I and Jack started this back in 2021. Thank you so much for your questions and how good the questions are. So for all the listeners of the Just Baseball Show, bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Yeah, I can echo. It's fun seeing the questions. I wish we could answer all of them, but we'd be doing this for like 24 hours straight. But it is so cool because even when we don't get to those questions, like if we don't get to yours and you've now submitted like 5, we see them and it helps steer us for future episodes too. So that's the really helpful thing is even if, we're not able to get to it, it helps kind of clue us into, what you might want to hear about moving forward and maybe even gives us some ideas for future episodes. So I really appreciate it. Even if we don't get to the question, don't think that we didn't see it or anything. Like it is helpful for us one way or another.
And if you're just stumbling onto this, maybe on YouTube, first of all, hit that big red subscribe button, hit this video with a like, because we post baseball videos every single day, 5 days a week, as well as on audio. If you're stumbling upon us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, 5 stars would be greatly appreciated. Again, if this is your first mailbag and you want to ask questions in the future, we drop a graphic on our Instagram at Just Baseball Show and on Twitter at JustBB_media. Normally, mailbag is every other Wednesday. We've also changed the schedule a little bit to every other Friday. So 2 weeks from now, be on the lookout for the next mailbag. So, Aram, it's kind of officially time. And I did chirp you on the last episode for not getting fully into the weekend roundup with me. So we're going to harmonize right now. I'm going to go. Do you want to go higher or do you want to go low?
I gotta go. I gotta
you.
go lower. I
Okay,
gotta go.
I'll go high.
I'm fighting a little cold here, and I love that I don't actually plug a specific brand. It's just the Walgreens type of like Dayquil, I guess. So I just plugged it anyways. But yeah, I'm fighting the cold a little bit here, so I can't go high note. It just won't work.
All right, I'll go high. 3, 2, 1.
Mailbag.
Mailbag. See, that was pretty good, but you're starting to get into it a little bit. And see, that's what I'm saying. It's not like you're anti. It's just Jack is so pro. He'll like hold notes for a good 2 minutes. He'll stand up in his chair and start running that finger around. That's the only reason I chirped you.
I mean, if this show had a third Jack, we'd be Amazon, I think.
I also want to commend you. I saw you drinking a green juice
Oh,
in
you
the
saw
recent
that?
episode. I'm proud of you.
You saw that?
I saw
Yeah.
that.
I had to mix that in. I have not. So I don't like to drink alcohol that often. Like, go out with the friends, have dinner, like have a drink, maybe that's it. I'll tell you what, that stretch of Griff's debut, Jeff Conine was very stressed. So he just kept getting himself gin and tonics. And then he would bring me down a bourbon. And my friends were texting me like, I feel like we're just watching you drink. So it would keep cutting over to Jeff, and I'm just taking like a swig also right next to him. So I felt the need to just cleanse after that. But it was stressful, and it got easy once he started performing. But I think it was the most consecutive days I've had even just a drink since college. So I'm on my green juice shit, and that's always inspired by you. I know you've been on that for a minute, so just need to cleanse this body of all that like bottom shelf bourbon that I was drinking at the ball game.
I talk about it so much because it's the only healthy thing I do, and it makes me feel really good about myself. Just get the green juice in the morning, first thing that you put in your body, and it makes you feel good for the rest of the day. And then internally, You don't have to eat vegetables for the rest of the day because you already had your serving in the morning. And whether that's a good idea or not, you should be eating vegetables all the time. It's
Uh-huh.
much easier than to pig out at dinner, makes you feel good about it. So it's hitting you in multiple directions. It actually is good for you. And that it makes you feel good about eating like shit later on in the night.
Exactly.
All right, enough about our eating habits. Let's start talking some baseball. So, again, guys, thank you everybody for asking these questions. We have 9 questions on the docket. We're going to go through all 9. And let's get after it with question number 1. Who is your favorite rookie breakout that you didn't see coming? Name a pitcher and 2 hitters. That was asked by Lil DJ 227 on X.
My
I
favorite part of
had
the mailbag, sorry, is just always the names too.
It's always the
Like
names.
it's
It's the Twitter
underrated
handles.
aspect. There's one that I know we're both gonna have, I guarantee.
And shout out Lil DJ. He's always on here because he's routinely asking banger questions. And we're starting off with him. So I have my pitcher. Like 100% I have my pitcher. Hitters, I wasn't as like totally shocked. I have one definite pitcher, and then a hitter I was kind of surprised about. But I actually want to throw it over to you first because this is what you do.
Yeah.
So if you were surprised by somebody, it's definitely a surprise to most. For me, I'm the casual, like, oh, I didn't really hear about this guy before this season.
It's so funny you say that because when I was going through all the rookies, like, of course, there's several rookies that are like overperforming, maybe what even my expectations may have been when I was doing the prospect write ups on them. But like, I get so excited about all these prospects that, I feel like I somewhat can expect a high end outcome for all of them. So I had to dig like into more of the older prospects or guys that, maybe I was just off. On the pitching side, it was definitely a guy that I just was off. But the obvious one, and I know that you're going to be in on this one too, is has to be Tyler Fitzgerald. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
Tyler Fitzgerald of the San Francisco Giants doing what he has done this year is just ridiculous. And it's not just about the fact that he came out of nowhere, right? There's always going to be guys that kind of come out of nowhere, but it's coming out of nowhere to be this good. Like it's not just, oh, he's got a 110 WRC plus and he's serving a solid role. It's no, he's lighting it up. And he slowed down maybe a little bit, but how could he ever maintain what he was doing before? But now we get a pretty decent sized sample of 75 games here with a 148 WRC plus, right? You could stop playing tomorrow. It's a 3-win season. That's insane. 75 games, he's got 14 homers and 16 stolen bases. Is this sustainable? I don't know. A lot of the expected stats are a little bit deflating in that regard, but I don't care. Like it's 75 games and he played really well, and it really was somewhat out of nowhere. We only saw him 10 games at the big league level last year, and then in 2023 for most of the year in AAA. As a 25-year-old, he was kind of league average there. It was good numbers, but it's league average for the PCL. So it was amazing to just see him explode like this in one of baseball's more pitcher-friendly ballparks.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't really have much to add. I wrote that down as my number 1 hitter that I just absolutely didn't see coming. Let me go to the pitching side, and then I'll throw it over to you for another hitter, and then I'll end it with a hitter too. And of course, I'm sure you have the pitcher as well. For me, the pitcher that I just did not see coming, Spencer Schwellenbach of the Atlanta Braves. This guy threw
Understandable.
110 minor league innings. He threw 31 innings at the University of Nebraska. He was also a position player. I think he
Yes.
was a shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're thinking about the Braves, we're thinking about AJ Smith-Shawver. We're thinking about Hurston Waldrop. I had no idea even about this guy. And then his first couple starts that I watch, I say to myself, is that a 98 mile an hour sinker? Is he throwing strikes more consistently than most veterans? He's got a walk rate in the 5% range, one of the best in Major League Baseball. How is a guy throwing that many strikes with that good of stuff while not really pitching? And then on top of it, having the confidence in your stuff in order to do that consistently, to stay within the zone, to not be afraid of hitters on the Phillies or the Mets in your division in big time games. Schwellenbach is becoming one of my favorite young pitchers, and I never even heard of him. Like I'd heard of him in Nebraska. I didn't even hear about him in the minor leagues.
Like, oh yeah, like I can swing it a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, no, it's incredible. If I hadn't got a live look at Schwellenbach, I want to say it was early this year, I believe. I don't know if I would have fully expected this either. Like we were really impressed. I know like Jack and I, like I was sent him the data and we were diving into it last year where he really kind of bursted onto the scene in low A, but he was 23 at that point, and wasn't striking out that many guys. But then I saw him early this year and I was like, okay, that fastball's jumping a little bit different. He's clearly like a converted infielder athlete on the mound. And so for me, like I started to get really bullish on him. And I know we got some pushback actually, because at the beginning of, or in the midseason update, we had him in the 70 range of the top 100, and he was ahead of some other right-handers that I think people liked more. And they're like, how could you have Schwellenbach ahead of this guy or whatever? And it really just was all the things that you're seeing at the big league level, like really shining through this year in double A, and then and mostly high A. And then that's the other side of it too, Peter, right? Like the reason why you haven't really heard of him and why a lot of people that aren't like incessantly tapped into prospects hadn't heard of him. You mentioned he hasn't thrown a lot of innings, but how about just innings above high A? He's only thrown 13 innings above high A before getting the promotion to the big leagues. So, I mean, this guy has not thrown a lot in the minor leagues, period. And most of his innings, the vast majority, have been at low A and high A. So, I mean, there just really hasn't been much opportunity to see this guy. And in true Braves fashion, right, it's a guy that they mined a gem. He performs well. He quickly flies up the minor leagues and he makes an impact at the big league level. And I think he's absolutely here to stay. And I think he's leapfrogged the Waldrips and the Smith Shavers of the world as, you know, that their next big piece on the mound, and they needed that. So he's huge for them.
I was on Braves Twitter. I like to scroll down there just a couple of times, and the way that the fans are slating in the postseason rotation, like none of them leave Schwellenbach off. Morton's gone, which is surprising. I mean, it's not as if like, oh, first of all, shout out Zoom for giving me the thumbs up. Charlie Morton has been there for years and has been a consistent postseason performer. I know he hasn't been great this year, but to schedule out a postseason rotation and just putting the rookie in there and not thinking twice about it, it's like, well, of course he's in there. And I totally agree with them. I just think it's an incredible story of a guy who is almost approaching more major league innings than innings before the major leagues on the mound. I mean, 110 in the minors, 31 at Nebraska. He's got 93 in the bigs this year. That's incredible.
It's absurd. And I'm excited because he's kind of to that point though, kind of fresh. And you know, I think should be ready to keep going, you know, through the postseason if the Braves are able to kind of make a little bit of a run there. But my other arm, and a guy that comes with some, you know, prospect intrigue previously, but I was more out on, especially going into this year, Simeon Woods Richardson. Like I was watching this guy throw in AAA, and another one that Jack can attest to. Jack watched him throw against him in Indy at points, and he was battling in trips. And now we're looking at this guy. Look, is he Schwellenbach good? No, but he's going to throw 130, 140 innings this year at potentially a sub 4. He's got a 3.95 ERA right now. All the underlying numbers are pretty much on par too. Like he just looks like a solid back end of the rotation starter. And this was a guy that for me, like seemed like an auto fade every time he got up for, you know, big league debut. I was going on BetMGM and putting a bet against him, but yeah, it's just not the case anymore. He's a much more complete pitcher. He's gotten better at pitching to contact, gets weak fly balls, has kept the ball in the yard much more effectively. And, you know, he's still only 23 years old. So, I mean, this is clearly a guy that I think is going to be a back end of the rotation starter for the Twins for, you know, the foreseeable future. And he seems like he's kind of built to be that innings eater, but I mean, he had a 4.9 in AAA last year, got up to the big leagues and got shelled in his one start. And then even in the first couple starts this year in AAA struggled. So yeah, I was kind of probably too quick to move off of him and did not expect him to, you know, have this resurgence this year and really settle in at the highest level.
I can't believe how quickly he adjusted with how young he is. Like you said to yourself, 23 years old. 23, and he's doing what he's doing. And what I like about Simeon Woods Richardson, and you know, it's a little similar to Zebby Matthews in that way. It's not quite to that level of command, but just having confidence in your stuff when you don't throw a 97 at that age, when you know that you're in the low 90s.
Especially when he got racked last year.
Exactly. Like that's a testament to his mental more than anything, that he's a bulldog on the mound. So those type of guys I'm always going to gravitate towards. Do you have another guy? I have an offensive guy.
I have one more hitter that, you know, is more about the defensive side. And by the way, Woods Richardson was part of that Jose Barrios trade. So now it's starting to look better after it was looking a little shaky with Austin Martin not really being the guy that, you know, I think people had hoped when he got drafted. But yeah, this is more about the glove, but still I just wasn't a guy that was on my radar at all is Jacob Young. Yeah. Is he going to be an above average like star, or is he going to be an above average regular? Maybe not. I don't know, but he's an elite center fielder who, you know, if he provides a 90 WRC plus for the entirety of his career, he's a 3-win player, I think, most seasons. So I didn't even really see him as being a regular at all, let alone being a guy that can really hold it down in center field. Like Dylan Cruz is a phenomenal center fielder, and they've got him in right now because Jacob Young is so elite up the middle. And the fact that the bat's been fine enough, like close enough to league average, and he's, a menace on the base paths, I just didn't really see this guy as a piece. And clearly, like, even if they do end up relegating him to more of this like part-time role, he's just clearly a big league piece for them. And again, just totally wasn't on my radar going into this year. And he's going to finish with a 3-win season, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so I wrote Jacob Young down too. I'll find somebody else off the top of my head, but I just want to add on to what you were saying about Jacob Young. The guy is as good of a center fielder as we have when it comes to range. And that helps when you're in the 98th percentile of sprint speed. The dude just flies. He's in the 100th percentile. He is the major league leader in the outfield in outs above average with 20. 20, right? Which is just absurd. And the fact is that he has 31 stolen bases as well. So that speed in the outfield then translates to the base paths. And he doesn't strike out a lot, and he doesn't really whiff either. So he makes a lot of contact, and a lot of these ground balls, these infield grounders, like he's getting to first and then turning that into a double. So you look at his quality of contact, and you're like, well, he doesn't really hit the ball all that hard. Like, I get it, right? He's probably going to be a 9-hitter. But if I told you your 9-hitter is going to steal 30 to 40 bags a year, play elite defense in center field, and just like, I feel like every team wants a guy like Jacob Young, just to do it all, kind of Swiss Army knife, fun player to watch, gritty. Like, he comes up in the 9-hole, and you're not thinking to yourself, well, this is an auto out. You say to yourself, what's Jacob Young going to do today? And I think Jacob Young is a great answer. My last one that is kind of in that same breath of a guy I personally just didn't see coming. He hasn't had this amazing year or anything. David Hamilton of the Red Sox.
I was thinking about him too.
He's been good. Now, the OPS has come down a little bit, right? He's at a 697 OPS this year, but 8 home runs, 33 stolen bases, doesn't strike out that much either. He's also got 17 doubles in 98 games. It's just way more impact with the bat than I thought. Like, I thought there was an opportunity where he was just never going to make it offensively.
Yeah.
But he is this year at the young age of, how old is he? And he's still kind of 26, but the speed is what's important for me. It's the Red Sox have so many bats. Jack and I talked about this on episode a few days ago, that there's such a log jam. And especially in a season where Vaughn Grissom isn't going to help, Trevor Story isn't going to help, they had to find some sort of answer at second base. And David Hamilton has kind of been that answer. I just didn't see this coming at all.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's all relative, right? So, like, even though he might not be an everyday player, this guy's clearly carved out a big league role. And I remember, when the Red Sox preferred Hamilton over Thad Ward, I believe it was Hamilton in the Rule 5 draft. They added Hamilton to the 40-man and lost Ward as the number 1 pick in the Rule 5. I was pretty critical of that. I thought it was a surprisingly bad move at the time. And it looks like at this point it's aged really well for them. And I know that was a Chaim Bloom move, but that actually seemed to be the right decision. I think I was off on that one because at the very least, you got a guy that can pick it very well at second base, can fill in at short in an absolute pinch. He stretched a little thin there, but just the fact that he can plug in there and not be a disaster is helpful. And just is a great utility type of bench piece that, again, you value those guys when you can find them. And usually they end up getting thrown into the fire because players get hurt in this long season that we have. And I love that you mentioned the impact. Like, he had flashed it in the minor leagues, just wasn't quite doing it as much in the upper levels, or at least at the big league level when we saw him early, and now starting to do that. So he's another guy that even if he's a 90 WRC plus, elite base stealer, can play a great second base, can move around the infield a little bit. And I think has a role for the Red Sox for the foreseeable future as that kind of bench and part-time guy. And definitely a speed up base runner that could always fill in that regard as well.
And I also want to answer a question that I've gotten DM'd a couple times. I've also seen it in our comment sections. Like, Lawrence Butler is technically not a rookie, but for Oakland, he has been just fantastic. Technically doesn't qualify. He had just too many at-bats last year. But if you remember, Aral, who was Lawrence Butler to me? Do you remember?
Well, he's the swaggy guy from the Futures game.
He was the eye test guy. As soon as I saw him walking around, he wasn't even taking BP yet.
You saw the Pit Vipers.
He just looked like a ball player. I mean, he just had everything, the confidence, the swag. The guy, I never seen him before. Never seen him take a swing yet. Never seen him run the bases. Never see him play defense. And I looked at RB Jack. I'm like, who the hell is that? And they're like, oh, Lawrence Butler. He hits the ball pretty hard. Watch BP. I didn't even need to watch him in the game. That was one of those random ones that I actually got right, I think. There's more that I
Two
get wrong, but that was what I kind of nailed.
and I think the electricity aspect though is like very valid because that's a big part
Yeah.
of why I think he has been so fun and I think when he's hot, like it's really hot, 2-3 home run games already this year. That third homer that he hit in Cincy, where like right as it gets off the bat, like you just see how excited he was. Like he just yelled. He like it was like he was a safety and just laid the boom on a wide receiver over the middle, right? Where he's just like or like dunked on somebody, right? Like that was great. Like that was you could just see the emotion. He cranks it and then, and it's funny because hitting is such like a locked in, like nuanced, like you want to feel relaxed and then let it eat. So getting that swing off and then just letting out like let's fucking go and then running like that was fun and it's why you can easily be a fan of his. But also like he's been swinging it, dude, and he's another building block for this A's team that all of a sudden has more building blocks than I think we thought they were going to have going into this year even.
So that reaction, I'm so glad you brought it up. You know what it gave me the exact same vibes are? Very different situation. Corey Seager against the Diamondbacks of the World Series when he hit that home run. And
Yeah.
he just holds the bat like this and is like, ah!
Yeah.
Like it's like a sword, like he's
Like a
going into war, like
gladiator.
he's a Trojan or something. Just ah! Like
I love it.
that is winning the like winning a game of the World Series versus an August game against the Reds. But that's a testament to Lawrence Butler, the type of passion that he plays with, even in a regular season game like that, where Corey Seager is a stealthy robot in the
Yeah.
best way possible. It's not taking away anything from him. It's just how guys manage emotions. To see Lawrence Butler have a Corey Seager home run World Series type reaction in August, I love Lawrence Butler. He's
Yeah.
like one of my favorite young players in baseball. So let's, or unless you have anybody else, we can move on to question number
That
two.
was it. That was it.
Yeah, it's one of these ones where they ask a question like name a pitcher and a hitter, and we're like, how about seven?
Yeah.
How
Here's
about
14.
seven of them? All right. Question number two, and this is mostly going to be for you. What are the most overrated and underrated analytical tools for evaluating players slash prospects? Asked by Jim underscore Henny on Twitter or X, whatever. Um, I'm gonna throw that over to you first. Obviously, you're the one in the
Yeah.
weeds evaluating prospects all the time. Like, I think there's a difference too because you're evaluating guys for the long term. I'm evaluating guys in the sense of will they perform today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is much different than a long term track record. So for me, there aren't really any overrated or underrated stats when it comes to making predictions for that day. That's why I don't think the question was geared for me. I think it was more geared for you. So, floor is yours.
Yeah. It's funny because I think it's really hard to find an underrated stat nowadays when everything is so like readily available and you have Baseball Savant the way that it is and you have all these different tools and resources and so many interesting people on Twitter that are presenting all these different statistics and models and all these things. But so it is going to be nitpicky. But I think one of the stats that I do see kind of get blanketed too much in terms of like maybe not having the nuance and adding other aspects to it to really complete the picture would probably be barrel rate. And again, barrel rate's going to, of course, overlap with a lot of the best performers in baseball. And just to kind of explain how a ball is considered a barrel, it's a batted ball that requires an exit velocity of at least 98 miles per hour and is struck between 26 and 30 degrees. And then for every mile per hour above that, I believe you can like go one more degree in either direction. So obviously, like balls that are hit at that trajectory at that speed have a really, really high batting average. I think it's like over at least 500 and a slugging percentage of 1500. The reason why I think it's a little bit of a like I don't think it goes beneath the surface enough is that I do think it lacks the nuance and kind of ignores a large pool of batted balls that are quite valuable. And I remember when we were talking about this, I think early in the season, I was talking about numbers from last year, and I feel like guys like Adley, Yandy Diaz, and like J Ram are all examples of like a lot of their batted balls don't get qualified as barrels, but are high batting average or expected batting average batted balls. Like, for example, Adley last year hit 745 on batted balls, 97 miles per hour between 13 and 23 degrees. So those 35 hits wouldn't count towards his barrel rate. But that's a guy that's typically below average in the barrel rate department. Matt Chapman only had 4 hits between those angles last year, but he was second in baseball in barrel rate with a 98 WRC plus. So, like, again, it's not really to say like barrel rate's a bad stat. It's a great stat because how often are you hitting the ball at the desired angle at a high exit velocity? Where I see maybe that it can be a little bit blanketed too much, I think, or maybe oversimplified as, okay, this guy had a high barrel rate, so he's due to, have a better stretch ahead because he's not performing right now, but his barrel rate's really high, so he's going to be really good. There's a lot of swing and miss guys that when they connect, they're barrels, but they don't have the nuance in between. And that's why you have guys like Nolan Gorman, Michael Toglia, Jose Siri, all in the top 15 this year in barrel rate. So, like, I'd rather have somebody that's a little bit lower in barrel rate than those guys and still spraying hard ground balls or low line drives or, sometimes a B swing. And I always talk about that. Like, you shoot a ball the other way, 94 miles an hour. That's a good swing. Like that's a good piece and it's not going to be a barrel. So I just think for the more well-rounded hitters, and I think for, the hitters that have kind of been ignored a little bit and now are starting to become more popular again, I think it does kind of overlook those types of guys. And I think, J-Ram is a perfect example of that, to be honest.
I love it. Is there any other stats that maybe came to your mind, or is it more just barrel rate?
I see people talking about bat speed, and of course, bat speed is going to correlate with a lot of good things. But average bat speed is another one where there's just so much more nuance to it. And I'm pretty sure J-Ram is low on that regard too. Jackson Merrill is super low, I think, relative to what people would expect, and it's longer than what people would expect. So I think those like the average of the swings is kind of off because again, it doesn't really take into account like B swings and what guys are doing even when they're not getting their best swing off. Like Giancarlo Stanton is the highest average swing velocity, but he has one swing for one spot, and you see the results of having one swing for one spot. Going to pulverize balls in the certain locations, but also a lot of swing and miss and some frustrations and inconsistencies there. So I think bat speed is a great start, and I think it's a really cool thing to add to Savant. But I think there's a lot more context that needs to be provided, and I think a lot more that needs to kind of be added in terms of how we analyze those things to really use it as a clear-cut tool to kind of predict future success. But with prospects, a lot of the stuff that I look at ends up being kind of proprietary. So it's hard to like talk about those things. And I know like there's not just a lot of access to some minor league stuff in general. But what I would say when it comes to the minor leagues, and I think one of the things that gets the most overlooked is the environment. And I know WRC plus gives you that, but in the minor leagues it's a little bit less like on track. I think there's times where WRC plus doesn't totally nail the whole story. There's a lot of environments in the minor leagues that are just totally different. And I think certain leagues, certain situations, like if you're digging into a player and you want to have like a strong take on them, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter, look at those league averages and also kind of look at the environments that they're in, because I think that ends up getting overlooked a little bit too often.
Yeah, I love it. One stat that I just see people asking me about, like in my write-ups, why I never include it. WHIP. Going much simpler. Walks and hits per innings pitched. I don't love WHIP because half the equation, or not half of it, but walks and hits, what type of hits are you allowing? Like, is it a lot of singles? Is it a lot of home runs? Is it a lot of doubles? Those are very, very different. That's why, like with fielding, independent pitching, and some of these other stats, when it doesn't include quality of contact, like Andre Palante, for example, highest ground ball rate in baseball, like that's not being factored in, right? Or guys allowing softer contact, but a lot of it is in the air. Maybe it'll regress. One guy is allowing a lot of tweener singles. One guy's allowing a lot of 450-foot home runs. WHIP, it's calculated the same. So that's why WHIP, like I don't look at WHIP at all. Like I'll even look at ERA, which is even simpler than WHIP. Batting average, I've thrown WHIP completely out the window.
Well, building off of that, I think, if you're going to go on those kind of like surface level stats, K minus BB percentage is one of the more consistent predictors of success among starting pitchers. And I think like that's kind of the funny cyclical nature of this whole thing too is I think sometimes those stats end up getting overlooked in terms of like I agree with you on whip, but then you have K minus BB, which of course just gonna be your strikeout rate minus your walk rate. Like there's been a lot of like research done that it is almost one of the more consistent. It is one of the more consistent predictors of success and correlations with success. And if you look at the top guys in that department this year on the mound, it's Chris Sale, it's Jack Flaherty, it's Tarek Skubal, it's Sonny Gray, Logan Gilbert, Dylan Cease, Yusei Kikuchi, which is crazy, but that was more of the recent stretch. Shodi Imanaga, Cole Reagans, and Zach Wheeler. So like that's one that it's super simple, but sometimes it is just more simple. And to the point of like quality of contact, all those things. If you're not walking guys and you're striking out a lot of them, odds are your whip will end up normalizing and being lower. And that's why I'd rather look at that.
Yeah. What do you think? And just we're keep building off this question, but like the most overrated simple stat. Like I think the most overrated simple stat is whip. Do you have like one that is just along the regular slash line across regular things? Is there just something that like you never look at for anything?
I mean, with prospects, I almost never look at batting average, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like, because I'm just looking at contact rates, I'm looking
Yeah.
at in zone, out of zone, I'm looking at all those things. So, like,
They're not predictable.
when
Yeah.
Jack will do the trivia of like who's leading this league in batting average, I have no freaking clue. Because I can tell you their zone contact rate. I could probably tell you what their chase rate is. I have no idea. So with prospects, I really, I don't look at it as much because it goes both ways. A lot of these environments are more hitter friendly, but also these guys, a lot of them suck at defense in the minor leagues, right? You have teams that are still trying to force their guys to stick it short or third or set, whatever it is. You got teams that are trying to get their guys to stick in the outfield. And so balls are just falling way more than they should. That actually jogs me on another one. I think people overuse BABIP as well, where it's like, oh, his BABIP is high, so he's due to regress. Yeah, there's going to be a correlation there. Like there are guys that typically, if they do have a high BABIP, yes, they could be due for regression. But there's also guys that if you're hitting the ball hard consistently, on a line, you're going to have a high BABIP, right? Aaron Judge has a 370 BABIP, but is he due to regress? No. So like that's one too where I'll see people are just like, oh, this guy's BABIP is high, he's due to regress. Dig a little deeper, and sometimes that might be true, but other times it might not, and I think there's a lot of times where it's not true. And I think it can more often work the other way, where it's a guy has a low BABIP, and you can say, oh, okay, well, better days are ahead, but also like it might just be the way that hitter is, right? More home runs. If you're more of a 3 true outcome guy, your BABIP's always going to be lower. So you got to look at the archetype of the player and who they are, and then go from there. But I just don't think BABIP is enough context to say, oh, he's due for regression, one way or another.
The baseball fan in me hopes all these stat websites cease to exist and it's just on eye tests and vibes. That guy looks fast to me. I'm giving him an 88th percentile sprint speed because he looks fast to me today in my feelings. All right, let's get to question number 3, and this is a banger. If the MLB adopted awards similar to the NBA, who would win awards like Most Improved Player, 6th Man of the Year, or 10th Man for MLB? This was asked by NJBina1 on Twitter. I love this one because it made us think outside the box. For example, what the hell is a 6th Man of the Year in Major League Baseball? I even had to text Arm about that.
Yeah.
We came to the conclusion that it's like the best super utility guy, because if we're talking about like the best bench bat, I mean, is it the guys who platoon? Like, is Jock Peterson for the Diamondbacks and Ryan O'Hearn for the Orioles like the platoon? Like, is that the answer to the question? I went in a different direction. Most improved player is pretty straightforward. Guys who were pretty good last year. And then I also looked at NBA most improved player awards. It's not guys who, were terrible and are now pretty good. It's guys who were decent and are now awesome, or at least that's what I looked at, because I'm not a huge NBA guy. I just watched my Knicks lose. Not this year, though. But I just watched my Knicks, so I don't really pay much attention to the overall NBA. But that was the gist I got of most improved player. So I have a most improved both in the American League and the National League. And then I have one guy who wins my 6th Man of the Year award, because this guy's played in multiple leagues and he does fit the super utility criteria. So I chose one. Do you want to start with most improved player?
Yeah. I'll go most improved in each league, and I wonder. I feel like we'll probably have overlap here, but there's a lot of
Definitely.
options too. Like
Definitely.
there's a lot of options. But I wanted to value like all aspects of the game. Especially like when I was looking at the National League. Yeah, as much as I wanted to go like Jurickson Profar, and I think I still do kind of want to go Jurickson Profar. I had to lean towards Brenton Doyle just because Doyle, I think given the leap that he's made, how bad it looked offensively last year and how solid he's been this year with the elite glove and center field and all of the things that he's doing. I think Doyle has just stood out on a different level. He's going to go probably 25-25 this year. He might go 25-30. And I wouldn't even rule out 30-30 if he gets really hot in the final month here. But, I think with what he's done defensively, with what he's done offensively, I mean, I would have never bet on this guy hitting 273 even at course, like anywhere on the moon. I just, from how it looked last year, I would have never expected that. He's going to be a 4.5 win player this year. I got to go with Doyle, but Profar is right there too. I mean, who had Jerks and Profar having a 140 WRC plus on their bingo card? Like that's got to be a guy that's right in that conversation too.
Yeah, my answer was Jurickson Profar, and I'll just fill in the cracks. Last year in 2023, the man had a 689 OPS. He's got an 841 OPS this year. Last year, he had 9 home runs. This year, he has 21 home runs and 9 steals. And he only has about 30 more at bats this year than he did last year. So I just think, and the 60-point bump in OBP, the
Crazy.
70-point bump in slugging in your age 31 season as a former top prospect. He also has a flair for the dramatic. I feel like of those 21 home runs, now I don't know the stats, but from watching Padres baseball, I feel like 10 of those have come in the 8th inning or later. Like this guy has just been such a spark plug, such a good player, such a good story. And I almost feel like sometimes when you and Jack or Jack and I, you and I, we do these kind of things, like we don't go with the obvious answer because we want to highlight some other guys like Jurickson Profar needs to be highlighted here.
Yeah.
The jumps in so many different directions. It's just been incredible for the Padres.
I mean, just he's been an offensive force, man. I mean, in terms of qualified hitters, he's 14th in WRC plus, tied. So I mean, this puts it in perspective. I think Rafael Devers is a 142 WRC plus. Jurickson Profar has a 140. So yeah, I could go either way. Like I had them both written down, and I was like, the classic, like I don't know what I want to order yet, so I'm just gonna wait for the waiter to come and then just panic and pick one. That's basically what I did with these two guys. So fun to watch both of them do their thing this year. And then I think in the American League, I feel like we got to have the same guy here, right? Like I feel like we have to, but
We
maybe not.
might not. I went in the American League with Brent Rooker of the Oakland A's.
Yeah,
And the reason I did that was he wasn't a bad hitter by any stretch of the imagination last year. He put up an 817 OPS. He hit 30 home runs, but he has less at bats, right? We're in September. He already has 33 home runs. He doubled his stolen base output from 4 to 8. This guy's slashing 295, 371, 578 for a 949 OPS. If we're talking about WRC plus rankings, he's right there with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This guy is 6th in Major League Baseball in WRC plus. He went from a good DH bat who can hit some bombs, to one of the best hitters in the entire league this year.
yeah,
And I also think about there's context for every hitter, right? You can look at some sort of stats and then it's, well, what was his role in Oakland? Think about it. If you're facing the Oakland A's, why would you pitch to that guy? Right? He's going to get pitched around every single second, and he's still got 33 bombs. He's still hitting 295, right? This isn't a 240 hitter with 33 bombs. This guy's almost hitting 300 with a 950 OPS. So I understand it's not this guy was horrible and now he's good. No, this guy was pretty good and now he's elite among hitters in Major League Baseball. And the only thing that also gave it a little bit of credence in 2022, the guy had 32 at bats and a 378 OPS.
yeah.
So this is also relatively new. So for me, it was Brent Rooker, but I'm curious to who you have.
That is a good one. And it's kind of similar in the regard that like this was a player that was good last year, but I've just been floored at how great he has been this year. I had to go with Jarren Duran. And
Yeah.
maybe there's a little bit of bias from the piece I put out on his swing adjustments and everything too. But it's not just that, right? It's not just the fact that last year it was a 2.5 win season, a 120 WRC plus, which is great, 8 home runs and 24 bags in 102 games. But this year in 136 games, he has a 6.8 FWAR, 21 homers, which is absurd that how much more power he's tapped into. And he's stolen 32 bags already. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? If it was just the offensive side, I 100% I'd lean Rooker. What ended up swaying me towards Duran was the defense because he was always fine, solid. I mean, last year kind of graded out as like fringy defensively. This year, I mean, he's been an elite center fielder. And then when they put him in other spots, he's been great there too. This is a dude that combined in 1,200 innings now in the outfield, 8 outs above average, 22 defensive runs saved. So this dude has been elite in the outfield. He has been elite at the plate with a 140 WRC plus, and he's going to probably steal close to 40 bags. He's been one of the best players in Major League Baseball this year. So I had to go with Duran just because of the multifaceted leap that he's made this year. And like, again, to put it in perspective, Gunnar Henderson's played 137 games. He has a 152 WRC plus and a 6.8 FWAR. Jarren Duran's played 136 games. He has a 140 WRC plus and a 6.8 FWAR. That is nuts. I know there's more to the game than that, but I think it puts in perspective just how incredible Duran has been this year.
So for all those watching on YouTube, you probably saw me laughing when Arm was talking, and it had nothing to do with what Arm's saying. It has everything to do with my stupidity. I did the exact same thing that I told you about Jurickson Profar. Jared Duran, obvious answer. So I wanted to go with Brent Rooker when the answer is Jared Duran. I did the same thing for just the other league that you did. We're just do what you say, Peter. Like, do what you say. I couldn't do it. But you're right. Jared Duran is the answer. And Brent Rooker would finish second in that award. But I just brought up Brent Rooker because I couldn't believe the offensive output. I couldn't believe a 950 OPS and 33 jacks. And when you factor in, you watch A's games, like, who would pitch to him? But you're right. It is Duran.
To your point, though, like, I would have cashed in on Brent Rooker 1,000,000% last year. Like I fully thought that was the max. So the fact, and I think relative to expectations is really important too with most improved. And like, Duran too, like I think the expectations kind of were like, okay, he's going to be a slightly better version of what he was last year. But with Rooker, I really thought that was the max, like playing, kind of meaningless baseball on that team, like, and just running into home runs. I did not see this more complete and well-rounded hitter. So I'm glad we highlighted two different players here, but relative to my expectations, I really did not think that Rooker was going to be able to take another step forward here, let alone I think really 2 steps when you look at everything he's been able to do offensively.
For 6th man of the year, or in our world, best super utility guy so far this year, is a man who has played in both leagues, and that man is Jazz Chisholm. The fact that he's played 97 games in center, he's transitioned to the Yankees where he's played a lot of third base and done a pretty damn good job of it. He's played some second base as well. And this is a guy where if you wanted to put him at short, you can. This guy never played third base before. What do the Yankees do? Say, you're athletic enough, let's try it. And he's been very, very solid. He can play second, he can play any corner, he can play anywhere on the diamond. But offensively, this guy has 22 home runs this year with 32 stolen bases. Now, he struck out at a 30% rate last year with the Marlins, and I talked about it a lot. Just too much swing and miss. Now, there's still a lot of swing and miss, but when you cut it down to 24.8% this year, a 5% drop, I'm going to notice. He's walking more than he ever has, 333 on base. He's still hitting for power, 117 WRC plus, 17% better than the league average hitter, 3.4 FWAR because he's played all over the diamond. I got to say, Arm, like this was a guy who I was routinely killing on this show. I did not like how he approached an at bat. I didn't believe in him truly as a defender. I thought he took bad routes. It didn't look like he was engaged in the game. Maybe a change of scenery was just what is needed because ever since he's come over to the Yankees, he's one of my favorite players. So I'm going to eat that one, and I've become a Jazz Chisholm fan. I'll be honest.
I had a feeling you would, just because I figured he'd have a different level of buy-in, and I think you've seen it, right? Like,
oh yeah,
the way he just jumped over to third base and has made some good plays there already, and he's just more locked in, and we figured that would be the case, right? Playing more meaningful baseball and the pressure and expectations that come with New York. He doesn't feel pressure though, like you could tell that, but I think he notices the expectations, and I think having more expectations is actually good for a player like Jazz Chisholm. So I think we're seeing the results there. I went even deeper, like in terms of like really picking up like a bench guy.
One quick thing just before you just to highlight what you're talking about the buy-in like coming over to the Yankees. With the Marlins this year in 101 games, he slashed 249, 323, 407. With the Yankees so far in 24 games, he's slashing 333, 374, 667 for a 1040 OPS, and he has 9 home runs in those 24 games versus 13 home runs in 101 games. So, and he already has 10 steals with us too. Like this
And
guy's a 10-10 guy in 24 games with a 1040 OPS playing third base. He's never played before.
and they were
Incredible.
worried about how his personality was going to fit in New York. Like, look, I think his personality is big, but I think they've had much more difficult personalities in that clubhouse in recent years.
Yes.
I got to go with my favorite like utility guy out there, and it's Edmundo Sosa. Like that is he to me is like the epitome of baseball sixth man. Where maybe not playing as much as a Jazz. Jazz is more of that true super utility, and Mundo's probably more of just that utility.
True.
But I had to just highlight him. And this was kind of like in the eyes of the beholder, the question, since it's open ended and like it's really hard to relate those things across sports. So I wanted to go with like one of the few true bench players that actually plays enough to make an impact, but also not enough to say that he's more than a utility player. It's only been 80 games this year for the Phillies, but in those 80 games, 7 home runs, 7 stolen bases, a 110 WRC plus, and a 2.1 F/WAR. Like he can really go get it, defensively in terms of he plays a great shortstop, plays a good third base, plays a good second base. Like he's a really good defender at 3 different infield spots. And the fact that he can, hit the ball pretty hard, that he runs well, and the fact that he just every time you drop him in there gives you a quality game. Like this isn't new, right? Like what's new is I think the offense being this good. For his career, he's been mostly like a 95 WRC plus guy. This year it's 110. But I mean, even last year, right? 104 games, he had 10 home runs and he had a 1.1 F/WAR. Like, I think just the way that he's been able to level up offensively this year and still this part-time role, like it is really hard when you're not playing consistently. To get back out there once or twice, 3 times a week and give quality at bats and play good defense. And that's what Sosa has continued to do for, a Phillies team that's obviously very loaded and needs him to be, comfortable in that bench type of role.
Love the selection of Edmundo Sosa. Just one of those guys where Phillies fans are probably going to rush to our comment section to be like, thank you, Edmundo Sosa. 29 other teams are like, what? And maybe Braves fans are like, yeah, it's a pretty good answer. All right, let's move to question number 4. And I absolutely love this one. Which players are the definition of donkey pop?
Yeah.
That was asked by LKE Garside 50 on Instagram. Now, let me define donkey pop. Donkey pop is not regular power. Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani arguably have the most power in Major League Baseball. Donkey pop, they don't fit that criteria. You need a certain BMI. You need a certain huskiness to qualify for donkey pop. All right, so I have my top 7. My top 7 donkey pop guys. At number 1, Marcell Ozuna. At number 2, Kyle Schwarber. At number 3, Yordan Alvarez. At number 4, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. At number 5, Adolis Garcia. And at number 6, Joaquin Noel.
Thank you. If you left out Joaquin Noel, I was going to close out the Zoom.
No shot. And I said 7. I accidentally wrote down 6. So those are my top 6 guys with donkey pop. Did I forget anybody?
Hold on. Let me sort on Fangraphs by BMI.
Yeah.
No, I that's the exact interpretation I had of it too. Is like it's got to be, it doesn't mean you have to be like overweight, but you got to be like that stocky slugger that really gets into it. Salvador Perez, donkey pop, donkey pop there too as well. I was trying to think. There was one other that I was like, okay, he fits the bill as well. But Salvi definitely in that conversation. I'm like Cal Rowley's right on the edge.
Yeah, he's donkey pop adjacent.
he's just close, but not quite there. He needs to put on a few more LBs if he wants to be Donkey Pop,
and just needs to hit
designation.
a few more home runs, like in general. But he's also playing in T-Mobile, so maybe if you get him in a smaller ballpark and you give him a couple cheeseburgers, like we're having another conversation.
Yeah, I agree. He's right in there. Pete Alonso,
Yeah, but not fat enough.
not
Like,
fat.
no, but he's he's
I
got
gotta
some huskiness to him.
can't miss right here. Can't miss Josh Naylor.
Oh, yeah, but again, like not he's not hitting like 30 homers.
I think this year he's going to.
Yeah, this year he probably Josh Naylor is a good one. Absolutely a good one. No,
That
that is a good one.
come on. Come on. This is bad on both of our parts, but at least I got to it. It would have been worse for me. Jake freaking Berger, man. Like by
Yeah,
definition, Donkey Pop.
donkey pop guy.
By
Absolutely.
definition.
Yeah, that is a donkey pop guy. In terms of like all timers, like Prince Fielder is the definition of donkey pop. Frank Thomas, definition of donkey
I
pop.
mean, he's like kind of chiseled.
Yeah, he is kind of, but there was some years there where
Yeah.
he was big and he
Yeah.
was hitting jacks. Like even at the end of like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I said Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Vladimir Guerrero Sr. There was some years there where he got a little bit big, but he still had pop. Those are kind of guys. Like those are my favorite power hitters in baseball. Just
Yeah.
the
Please hit us in the YouTube comments of like some old school Donkey Pop guys. Obviously, like Babe Ruth is like the
yeah,
founding father of Donkey
true.
Pop.
Founding
But
father of donkey.
but I'm trying to think of like some other guys there. There's got to be some throwback, not even throwback, but like 80s, 90s players that would be hilarious. Like that I think fit the bill.
All right, so we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 5 more questions left. And this one is a pretty good one. And I only came up with one answer because I don't think that you can come up with just a ton of answers for guys like this. So here's the question. In light of O'Neal Cruz moving to center field, who are some players you are most interested in / could benefit the most from a position change? This was asked by Joey TheaKer 24 on X. I'm bad with pronunciation. It's a bunch of different letters. Joey, appreciate the question. I have one answer, and I can start. CJ
Yeah.
Abrams is minus 15 in terms of outs above average. Second worst shortstop is about minus 8. So, in terms of the range, for a guy who's fast, he's not getting to balls. And there was also another shortstop in Washington a little while ago who never changed positions, who I think answered maybe this question back in 2021, like the first time we ever had a mailbag, because I think that's where I remember. Trey Turner. Now, Trey Turner never kind of moved off short, right? He was second baseman, moved over to short and kind of stuck there. I always didn't really think he was, but whatever. He's a shortstop. I think CJ Abrams could potentially move off shortstop at some point. The defense really hasn't been there for him. Keeping the bat in the lineup, no doubt about it at this point. I mean, the guy's been a star this season for Washington, but in terms of playing shortstop, and unfortunately, I'm presenting you, Arm, with a problem, not a solution. Like, I don't think, does he move to center? I don't know. I don't really want to move him to second.
He can't really move to center because they got Young and
Yeah.
Cruz. So I'm with you. Like it is weird. Maybe he plays third, but the arm is like but maybe that's something that he can get more comfortable with there.
You think
But then they got Brady House coming up.
You think Ildemaro Vargas is just going to give up his position like that?
No, he's gonna have
No.
to pry it away.
Trey Lipscomb?
Yeah, like that is the challenge. It's like, yes, he's a candidate to move off, and I agree that's the number one guy I have. And I think it's starting to affect him offensively too. He's really slumped in the second half. But yeah, where do you put him?
Yeah.
Because Luis Garcia actually looks like a solid. He's not even the best defensive second baseman, but he looks like a solid bat for them. It looks like a guy that could be holding it down there. And Brady House is a great third baseman. So I don't know. Like I'm very interested to see how they approach it, but just objectively, without looking at the roster situation, he would be better off not playing shortstop. I think moving forward, and I think it is starting to affect him offensively as well. And I like it. He has cost him some games at short, and it just seems like he's not totally comfortable there.
And then
So that was the first name I had too.
and then also, let's say he moves off short. Now, who's your shortstop? Was also my issue.
Nasim Nunez.
Yeah, and I was thinking in my head an outfield of Dylan Cruz in center, James Wood in right, and CJ Abrams in left gets me fired up, but I feel like that's kind of a pipe dream. First of all, that's moving Wood from left to right. He's played a lot of left field. I'm sure he can make that transition very, very easily. I think I've seen him play some right field
Yeah.
when I've turned on a Nationals game. I'm pretty sure I have, but I've also seen him play some left. Whatever. But to maybe move CJ Abrams, I feel like you're not using the speed well, putting him in a corner like that, but
And then
maybe I'm
Jacob Young,
overthinking
like
it.
it
Yeah,
depends if they see him as an everyday
true.
guy, but then Jacob Young ends up moving. I still think like Jacob Young makes the most sense as like this fourth outfielder that plays more than your average fourth outfielder. But um if he takes a step forward offensively, you got to keep that guy in the lineup every
Have to.
single day. And we just talked about like
Yeah.
how solid he is, and especially on the defensive side. So they've got some interesting decisions I think to make. And yeah, I think you give Abrams this offseason to try to make that leap defensively. But yeah, I just think it's going to be too much of a leap. So they got to sort that out. But I do think he's costing them pretty dearly defensively at short. Doesn't matter as much right now because they're out of it. But that's a team that could sneakily be a surprise contender next year and definitely could be in it in 2 years. So yeah, I think they need to kind of figure that out and sort that out. I was looking at, yeah, I know he's like it needs to hit for this to be a thing anyway, since to stick up in the big leagues. But like Nolan Gorman, another guy that like I want to see him just swing it more consistently and swing it better, but he's rough, man, at second base. And I think that's a guy that ultimately would just be best off playing first and slugging and focusing on mashing. Like second base is just, it just looks brutal and stiff there. And that's a guy that I just think would be better off playing first. And then a vet that like, I just think if you're going to sign this guy and you want him to keep going and be the most valuable, Jerkson Profar, man, he is horrible in the outfield.
Yeah, he is.
He rakes, obviously, but my goodness, I know he's a little short for first base and he grades out horribly everywhere. Like he's just not a good defender, which is really funny because he came up as a shortstop. I'd stick him at first and just roll with that. It's the only position he hasn't graded out like horribly, even though he's a little bit short. I just think that's a guy that needs to be in at first base. I think he'd be like a 4-win player this year, maybe closer to 4.5 if he was playing first and not negative 15 defensive run saved or whatever it is, and negative whatever outs above average in left field. He's brutal.
The thing is, though, I feel like they just have to use him in left field because what, you're going to move Cronenworth off? Like you got
No,
already Bogarts at second and you got Ha-Seong Kim and Tatis is now returning. Like I think you just have to keep him in left for the time being, even though I agree with you. It is not good out there.
one question for you. Is Jazz Chisholm a third baseman now?
Yeah. Like he's
Or
our
does he
third
slide over to
baseman.
second next year?
Oh, he'll
Regardless, he seems like
probably,
a position change candidate, right? Like he's not going to be playing center, I don't think, for the
yeah,
Yankees like
no,
next year.
definitely
Like,
not.
oh, maybe he'll fill in here and there. But I think
I,
between, what you've got with Dominguez out there and, what he can potentially be as a center fielder, I think wanting to preserve Jazz's health as well and the impact of that position, I feel like Jazz is better on the dirt moving forward. Like, do you think he ends up kind of splitting time between third and second? And that's kind of an answer. I know he's playing third right now, but that's kind of an answer, right? He played 97 games so far this year at center field. So like this would technically be a position change. He's played 23 at third and 3 at second. Like I think that's a guy that moving into next year probably projects best on the infield dirt, especially with the Yankees roster situation.
I think it's tough to answer that question now because ever since Gleyber Torres moved into the leadoff spot, he's been very good for the Yankees and he's a free agent after the year. I don't think that they are going to sign him. I
No.
really don't. So, but again, it's not impossible for them to do so. So, I think if Glaber leaves, I think he's going to be the second baseman next year.
Yeah.
But then also, like, what if they decide to sign a second baseman? Like, I don't know what they're going to do. I have my opinions on what they should do, which we'll talk about in the offseason when we play general manager. So I don't want to get that deep into it right now. But it kind of depends on the direction that they want to go. I think the good part about having Jazz is you can splurge on the person that you want, whether that be third base or second base, because you know that Jazz can play either or. And
Exactly.
Jazz has shown that when he's come over, a lot of great quotes coming out of him too, just wants to win. Doesn't really give a shit where he plays as long as he's in the lineup and playing. And I'm rooting
Yeah.
for that. So for me, I feel like that's a problem that we find out after we, as in I'm a part of the Yankees, after the Yankees make their roster, and then it's like, all right, we have a hole here. That's where Jazz plays. And I think that's why Jazz is so valuable to the Yankees, is that he can really be versatile, whichever they need at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, let's go to question number 6. But before that, a quick break. All right, we're back with the mailbag, and we move to question number 6. Which teams out of contention right now are the best set up to make a playoff run in 2025? That was asked by Nate_Perez4 on X. I got my answer. I can get into it first, or I could throw it over to you. What do you think?
You go ahead. I feel like I've snagged a couple of your answers, so I think we're going to overlap on one of them maybe here. I have two teams, so I might have one difference.
So here's a team that I've already been planning on investing in for next season. Now, of course, lines are not out because the season ain't over, but this is already a team I'm starting to really dive into. I think that the Cincinnati Reds are primed for a really, really good year last year. We forgot they lost one of their key cogs in the lineup in Matt McClain. You probably forgot about Matt McClain because he has barely played this entire season. I don't even know if he has a game under his belt.
No.
Heimer Candelario, they signed him to a multi-year deal. Do I think he's just terrible now? No, I do not. Noelvi Marte missed 80 games because of a PED suspension, and then he comes back. Is he really as bad as he's shown? I don't think so either. They have so many good pieces on offense where a lot of them have been injured for the entire season. I think next year is a big prove-it year for a guy like Nick Lodolo. I think Hunter Green has established himself as an ace in this league. I think they have a lot of good bullpen arms as well. Like, I look up and down the roster and I think to myself, this team is way too good to be performing like they have this year when you look at their overall record. And then I realized, well, this team is one of the worst in one-run games. And now it's not a bullpen issue, which is what I look at, right? Some teams are really bad in one-run games and they have a really, really bad bullpen. That makes sense to me. Like the Marlins last year, a big reason why we faded the hell out of them is because they were unbelievable last year in one-run games. They were always on the right side of them. Those things tend to regress. And I'm thinking to myself, they didn't have a good bullpen. That doesn't even make sense. That's pure luck. The Reds have a good bullpen, and they've been getting crushed in these one-run games. Like, I think Alexis Diaz bounces back. I think it was a bad year for him, right? So I look at a lot of guys where I'm like, okay, you were injured. There's some bad years, guys coming over. This is a team, they're young. I also think that they have shown in off seasons past that they're willing to spend, right? They're not going to go get Juan Soto this offseason, but can they give out a couple 3-4 year deals where it makes sense? They've also proven that they're pretty good at the deadline, making good trades, getting Spencer Steer, right? The Luis Castillo trade as well. They've proven that they can be able to do that. So I'm going to be buying a lot of stock in the Reds for next year. Who's your team?
I like that because you figure Ellie De La Cruz takes another step forward and could become that MVP candidate type of player. You figure outfield, I think, is one of the easier right-handed hitting outfielders is what they need. I think they can find that.
Yes.
And that's not even mentioning that Christian Encarnacion Strand has been out pretty much for the entirety of the year. A power bat that I think a lot of people were excited about this season. I agree. Like Candelario can't be worse. McClain was a key guy, and I think the leap that Hunter Green has made this year is absolutely huge. They haven't had Ashcraft all year. Abbott has been hurt for portions of the year. Lodolo, I don't think you can use that now as like better days ahead because he's seems to be perpetually hurt, but that is still another guy that you hope can give you more innings. Williamson's been out the whole year. Rhett Lauder just came up and I think has looked really good in the upper minors down the stretch here and turned in a decent big league debut. So the pitching is still there, and I think they've got other guys that could be coming up too. So I think the Reds were one that I was looking at, but I ended up kind of pivoting a little bit more towards, and I think they're more of an obvious pick, quite literally, because they're not even that far out of it right now. So I'm gonna go with two picks because I think this one's a little obvious, but I'd be remiss not to mention them. The Tigers, it's coming together here, right? Like you can really start to see it. It's already coming together this season. Like you've seen how much better they're playing in the second half since they've gotten Kerry Carpenter back. Like that dude rakes. We've been saying that on the show for over a year now. And now that he's healthy and back on the field, like this guy's looking 586 in Comerica. Parker Meadows has started to really settle in this year. Riley Green, when he's on the field, has looked like he's blossoming into Riley Green. Colt Keith, great second half. They've called up Jace Young, who looks like he can fill a role for them as he settles in. Torkelson all of a sudden is back and looks decent. So that side of it's great. And then they've got their catcher of the future. I think that could be a decent backup at the very least in Dingler. And Jake Rogers has been fine. But, what I really like about them is the pitching side of things, where you have, the Cy Young favorite here and Derek Skubal is probably almost surely going to win it. You've got Casey Mize finally back and like a bunch of other back end types of arms like Ty Madden, who's been pretty decent in his big league debut, but Reese Olson's been hurt, and that's a guy that looks like a solid middle of the rotation arm when healthy. It was a strained shoulder. Sawyer Gibson Wong, I think, is a solid back end of the rotation arm. Not even mentioning Jackson Jobe, who has frontline upside. Like they've got dudes, I think, throughout here, and again, just fill in guys like a Matt Manning. Wilmer Flores has been hurt for most of the year. I think could be a really solid high leverage arm, and they've got some decent high leverage arms. So I think this is a team that the offense has really started to come together. They definitely need to find a shortstop. Like I don't think Trey Sweeney's the guy, and definitely Javi Baez isn't. But they've got a lot of pieces here and some youth that I think has really matured this season, and then arms as well. And then I think the other team, unless you have something to add on the Pirates, or excuse me, on the Tigers, is the Pirates. Because look, they need to figure some things out offensively, no doubt. But this staff, I think, has the potential to be one of the most electrifying young staffs in Major League Baseball as soon as next year. I don't need to sell you on Paul Skeens. I don't need to sell you on Jared Jones. And even Luis Ortiz has settled in and looked like he could be like a back end of the rotation arm. I don't need to sell you on Mitch Keller either. But what also really elevates this ball club is Bubba Chandler is one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. He's a top 25 prospect for us at just baseball. And I mean, you add him to the fold too. It's a 70 grade fastball. You've got Skeens, which is an elite heater. You've got Keller with a great heater. You've got Jones with an elite heater, and you've got Bubba Chandler with an elite heater. The floor is so high with those guys. So that side of things is really fascinating. And then not to mention, what's been a frustrating position for the Pirates this year? Catcher. And Andy Rodriguez has missed the whole year with that Tommy John surgery. He was one of the top prospects in baseball, a guy that I have loved for a long time. Switch hitter, solid defender, has the potential to be an above average power guy as well. Good feel to hit. Like that's going to be their catcher moving forward, I think. And adding him now back to the fold, IKF looks like he could be a solid shortstop for them. Yes, they need to go get some more offensive pieces, no doubt about it. But I think they can go sign a couple decent bats, knowing that their rotation is going to be mostly on the minimum for the next several years and move forward that way. I think this team is real close to being solid, and there's no way Brian Hayes is worse. I've given up on the breakout thing or anything like that, but there's no way he's worse next year.
We're going to talk about the Pirates a little bit more when we get to some questions about coaches and general managers that I have questions for you. And I guess the last team, like the thing is, I wrote them down and we already kind of talked about them ad nauseum, but I think the Nationals are getting kind of sneaky here. Not only have they had a pretty good season based on expectations. I know there's 15 games under 500, but there were lines at the beginning of the season where it said, will the A's or the Nationals have a worse record? And that was after the A's had one of the worst seasons in recent memory, but the White Sox took everybody's pain away. So the fact is that they've been well over expectations. We already see what CJ Abrams can do. James Wood is a freak of nature. Dylan Cruz is phenomenal. Luis Garcia, like those four guys are all 24 or younger. We're talking about Jacob Young as well. But then in the rotation, like there's a lot of interesting young arms here. And that's why I'm not fully buying in for next year. Might be more 2026. But when you got Gore, Irvin, Hers, and Mitchell Parker, like those are all four arms where you're hoping like two of them can become really good and two of them are pretty good. And that's a pretty solid rotation led by a lot of firepower on offense at the top. And also in the Nationals bullpen, like it's mostly not very good, but there are a couple of arms down there, which kind of tells me that the Nationals are pretty good at identifying relievers in the offseason to bring in where they might not be very good, maybe developing them in their system. So they're a team that I don't think perfectly illustrates this answer for next year. But I think when we're doing this mailbag episode on September 4th of 2025, they will be the answer then. So I just wanted to mention them as someone I got my eyes on.
I'm glad you mentioned them too, because like there's going to be a couple different arms that they can plug in, and they've got two top 100 arms in Arlen Susana and Travis Sakura, who will be in the rotation probably in 2 years. But Patrick Corbin's 5.5 ERA pitching every fifth day is going to be gone, and the money's going to be gone too.
Yeah,
So they might be able to go sign a couple of vets if they want, and that part of it's interesting as well. I think the rotation that'll be an addition by subtraction, and they've got some guys that could be of interest. You hope Cade Cavalli will be available. They shut him down with dead arm after coming off of TJ, but if Cade Cavalli's available, that would be awesome. Trevor Williams was really solid last year, and then was just banged up this year, just never really got a chance to get it going, but. He could be a solid back end of the rotation arm. So like they've got bodies. And I think that is a team that with the young stars or the young high upside players maybe progressing here, you could get really excited about what the future holds in Washington. And I do think that they will spend, whether it's this coming off season or the one after that.
I agree. Let's get to question number 7, another great one. Which medium or small market team do you think will push in serious chips and spend big this offseason? That was asked by Krabby Patty 05 on Instagram. I have one because I think it's kind of impossible to correctly predict some of these small medium market teams, like what exactly they're going to do. So I've come to it from, I really want this team to do something. And I also think that they have the wherewithal to do it. So I'll start. The Royals.
Bang.
Michael Wacha has $16 million coming off the shelf. You're nearing the end of Salvador Perez's contract, and you're also 20th in payroll among 30 teams this season. And a lot of that money is going to Bobby Witt Jr. So you prove to your fan base and you prove to the rest of Major League Baseball that you have the money to make big time signings like this. And now this is the window, right? This is Bobby Witt. He hit his prime a lot quicker than we all thought. Start building around him. You also have Cole Reagans. It's not often that you get a left-handed pitcher with that type of stuff just kind of fall into your lap from an Aroldis Chapman type deal. You're seeing Seth Lugo take a step up. You still have him for another year. So what are kind of the Royals' weaknesses? Well, we look at the bottom of their lineup. Could they add some big-time offensive pieces? Could they also go out and add a big-time starting pitcher? This Royals team has the skeleton. They just need to go out in free agency and add some meat to the bones. And I think that they are in a really good position to do that this offseason. Go pounce. Go watch what you can do in the playoffs, because I think they're going to make it. Maybe they go on a little bit of run. Maybe they get bounced early. I don't know. But they're going to see that their window is starting to open. Go add some big-time pieces. The lane is here. You could be the best team in the American League next year. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe Houston takes a little step back. Maybe the Guardians take a little bit of a step back. The Twins aren't spending because of TV deals. And then you look at the American League East, like anything can happen. So if I'm the Royals, I'm spending big this offseason. I know my areas of concern, and I'm pouncing, and I'm really excited for them.
I'm just going to add to that because that's who I've got too. And really, this is the window now to do it because they've got a lot of their complementary and solid pieces all in pre-arb. They only have 81 million committed to 2025. I'm sure that number would go up a little bit as a couple players hit arbitration, but the whole point is actually most of them are pre-arb. The following players are pre-arbitration next year for the Royals, meaning that they're going to make the minimum or slightly above that. Cole Reagans, Vinny Pasquantino, Maikel Franco, Freddie Fermin, Michael Massey, Alec Marsh, Lucas Urseg, James MacArthur, and then Bobby Witt Jr. is only making $7 million next year. He doesn't exceed $20 million in a season until 2028. So you have Bobby, you have one of the best players in Major League Baseball on a major discount until 2028, and you have these guys in pre-arb or ARB 1 in the next couple of years. So this is the time to do it. You mentioned Wacha coming off the books for $15 million, and then you have Seth Lugo, who's been one of the better pitchers in baseball at $16 million going into next year. It's a no-brainer to go spend right now. And we give them credit this offseason, right? Like the fact that they added some decent pieces around and spent a little bit to try to give this Royals team a shot. And we said, like, it's nice. It'll be good experience for the Royals to play games going into the season, just knowing that it's not already over before it started. And now we're seeing even just that, even adding pieces that we thought would just make them a 500 ball club have actually been enough to make them a playoff contender and a team that we expect to make the playoffs now. So imagine what would happen if, they go out and add some impactful pieces, like some high impact, like $100 million player, maybe. I don't know if they go that high. Maybe it's a couple $50 million guys, whatever it may be. But there's clearly an opportunity here from a financial perspective and from, I think, the just overall roster construction perspective, that is a no-brainer. And if they make the playoffs, it's so much more revenue for the team as well. So even just making it, into the first round or whatever it may be, like that's going to be more money for them to spend. I fully expect them to spend a good amount of money going into next season. And as you mentioned, like Salvi, a couple more years, but then that's going to be off the books in a couple seasons as well. So when you're giving out a long-term deal, you can feel good about the short term and the long term. So I think the Royals are the most obvious spender, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're players for like some big names.
I also think that the Reds fit this criteria. I think the Reds are going to be spenders next year. Now,
You
not
think
to
you
the
think
level of,
Castellini won't be a broke boy?
that's the thing. It's like I know their ownership, and that's more of a want than a prediction. But
They
they
should.
have proven, I mean, they did sign Candelario. It's not like they're not signing anybody. And there's holes here. And maybe it's more through the trade market where they're moving off some guys in order to get new pieces. So maybe that's really how they're going to change their team. But I think the Reds, they're just in an interesting spot next season, and I'm very excited to see what they do. But I don't have the confidence in them to spend like I do with the Royals. Was there any
Yeah.
other teams that kind of came to mind as a team that you think would spend? I think the Tigers potentially could spend a little bit too.
They could. I wonder if they're traumatized at all. I mean, it obviously wasn't Scott Harris, but with the, Javier Baez situation, but just knowing like, okay, eat that. You look at the rest of the team, there's really not that many large financial commitments. I don't know how much is going to be owed over the next few years to like Miguel Cabrera and how that all works, but you figure on a long-term deal, if it's backloaded, they could go do that. And, you see the core that they have there. It wouldn't be shocking to me if they went that direction either. So I could see that. I'm just kind of curious to see how Scott Harris operates and everything and kind of an open free agency now where they're getting closer to that winning window. I don't know if it's this offseason or the next one, but I do think the Nationals are going to spend one way or another, right? Like they offered Juan Soto $400 million. That money was going to come from nowhere. Yes, they still owe Strasburg and everything, but they are finally getting Corbin off of the books. And all of these young, impactful players are all pre-arbs. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Nationals, finally spend a little bit too. Might be another offseason from now, but wouldn't surprise me if they do it this offseason.
What if they bring Soto back for 600 million?
That'd be fun. That would be very fun, but I won't hold my breath.
Yeah, me neither. Question number 8. We got two more. What team is the most exciting to watch right now? I'm a Pirates fan, and right now this team just isn't enjoyable to watch,
Okay.
even with Jared Jones and Paul Skeens on
Okay.
the mound. Asked by bbilly197 on Instagram. B Billy, you're telling me you're not entertained with Paul Skeens on the mound?
Come
Telling me
on.
that?
I
Even
get it.
Jared
The offense is
Jones.
pretty putrid and the
But I mean,
bullpen
come
has had some
on.
fun, but come on.
Come on. So I have been watching a ton of NL West baseball.
Yep.
So
Yep.
maybe you see that, like why that's highlighted for me on, my top 10 teams that I think can win the World Series. I'm consistently gravitating towards watching the Arizona Diamondbacks, consistently watching the San Diego Padres, consistently watching the Los Angeles Dodgers. Like these three teams are so much fun to watch. Like this Dodgers Diamondback series was so electric. Like these teams are fast. They hit for power. They got guys coming out of the bullpen that are throwing 103. They got really good starting pitching. It's competitive. And I feel like the West in general, when we talk about teams, not a lot of people watch them. And the reason is it's not really their fault. Like I live on the East Coast. I'm up until 12, 1 in the morning watching these games finish. So I
Mm-hmm.
understand you got work in the morning. You got to wake up early. You make the Just Baseball show a part of your morning routine. First
Yeah,
of all,
just
shout
listen to
out
us
to you
talk about
guys.
it instead.
I get it. I totally get it. But what I am saying is if you are able to stay up, people on the West Coast, they have no problems with this. I'm talking about the people on the East Coast. If you are able to stay up and watch this, I think it's the best baseball
I agree.
out right now.
I do agree.
Another team that I have been watching almost religiously lately because I can't decide whether I want to put futures on them is the Atlanta Braves. Because every single time the Braves are on, well, I want to watch Reynaldo Lopez. I want to watch Schwellenbach. I want to watch Fried. I want to watch Sale. So I'm already gravitated towards a team so I can watch good starting pitching. And then I'm like, is this the day the offense comes to play? But god damn it, if I have to watch more Luke Williams, if I have to watch
Yeah,
more Whit
jeez.
Merrifield, more Gio Urshela, like I'm gonna have an aneurysm. But it's like, but then in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, Peter, Austin Riley went down. What do you expect them to do? Ozzy Albies went down. What do you expect them to do? Yeah, they used to have Acuna right. Now they have Ramon Laureano. So that's where I keep going back and forth with them. So I wouldn't recommend that unless you're a crazy person looking to make, any money on these people. But if we're talking about just general fun baseball, National League West is kicking everybody's ass right now.
I agree. You're getting more like inside the park homers. You're getting
Yeah.
more like insane plays, like late suspense. Corbin Carroll being back is a huge part of it too. I mean, Jackson Merrill doing what he's doing. Like, I think the NL West is kind of unmatched right now in terms of the intrigue and the fun. I'm
And
with you
then
there.
just to further your point a little bit, it's funny though, the Giants might be the most boring team to watch in Major League Baseball, but if we're talking about the entirety of the NL West, like you can go watch some Coors games, like they're all weird and
Yeah.
crazy and like they're fun, and you can
I
watch
mean,
Brent Doyle play center. I mean, it's fun.
it's fun. I enjoyed my time at course. The games are
Yeah,
over and they're never over. Jeff Conan actually told me when we were at the game because the Marlins made that 5-run comeback. He said that they used to flash on the scoreboard. It's never over in course
it isn't.
as like a reason why the Rockies could come back. But I'm assuming that they just blew so many leads, they just stopped flashing that because it was just more working against them. Where it's like, oh, it's never over in Coors. Where you're like, I think they
We're
just
gonna
stopped.
lose.
We're gonna lose. So they stopped flashing that thing. The only other team I would add is the Orioles, and this is just because I think it gives you a little bit of everything, right? I know Burns has been iffy lately, but you're still watching a Cy Young contender there. Eflin when he's on is great as well. But I like the combination of a Gunnar Henderson who's already a bona fide superstar, and then also the young and Anthony Santander who's been a star this year too. He's going to hit 40 plus homers. But then you got the Jackson Holidays and the Kobe Mayos of the world. So you get this fun youth intrigue too. I think it's just a fun combination here on this ball club of the guys that are having monster years, and even just watching Adley do his thing behind the dish. But then you've also got the future and a Colton Cowser, a Jackson Holiday, a Kobe Mayo. So I do just very much enjoy. Maybe it's the prospect head in me. Very much enjoy watching the Orioles. Of course, when Westbrook's healthy, that's a ton of fun too. So that's a team that for me is always a blast. And hey, Felix Bautista might get back in the playoffs, maybe. But I love watching Yennier Cano throw. It's just a fun team overall. And Craig Kimbrell, man, if you're not rooting for anybody, it's always fun to watch him come in. You never know what's going to happen.
Just to add two more teams, just so we kind of touch on every division, right? We talked about the West, we've talked about the East a little bit. Two teams in the Central that I have just loved watching all season long. Brewers fans, Brewers Nation, you guys know, watched a ton of Brewers baseball, watched a ton of Guardians baseball. So if you're looking for teams where the baseball gods have sprinkled some magic, those are my two magic teams. That's how I'm describing them this year. The magic duo, Guardians and Brewers. It's never over. And their bullpens. You're watching a new guy come out every day where you're thinking to yourself, I mean, is this the greatest bullpen arm I've ever seen?
Yeah, that is true. And also defensive masterclass from the
Yes.
Brewers every time you took Blake Perkins making highlight reel grabs, the infield doing what it does. Like the
Terang,
Brewers are a
Terang
fun
makes a
team
diving play every game. I think I watch. Like Bryce Terang and Blake Perkins make diving plays every single day.
every single time.
Every single
Yeah.
time. The Guardians too. So last question before we say goodbye. Which teams have GMs, president of baseball operations, or managers that are on the hot seat? Hashtag fire Farhan is included in the question, asked by y.set.ryan on Instagram. I'm never very good at this. This is not something that I pride myself on. I wanted to include it because I just had like a few questions for you, Aram. So I'll bring up my first one. And I kind of foreshadowed this in an earlier question. I don't know, and Pirates fans, let me know in the comments below.
I know they don't like him.
Are you guys Derek Shelton and Ben Cherington guys? Like, this deadline from Cherington was terrible.
I think the fact that he traded for Brian De La Cruz, that did sour me
Trading
on
prospects for Isaiah Kiner Falefa. Like, are you going for it or are you not?
yeah.
And he just like the Henry Davis pick wasn't very good.
No. Paul Skeens
Right?
in.
Paul Skeens was
Well,
amazing,
the
but
thing
like
with Davis though is
in that
they
draft, could you have fallen? Like if you went Cruz or Langford or you went Walker Jenkins or Max Clark, like I don't think he could have failed there. Now,
no.
credit to him, he went with Skeens, but the thing is, what are the other like draft picks that Charrington
Well,
is getting? And then Shelton, I mean, you go on Pirates Twitter, they
Yeah.
hate him.
Yeah.
And I can see why, like, he makes some bonehead decisions, but at the end of the day, like, the talent isn't that great for him to use in that bullpen and just general decision making in game. That's also a testament to Charrington as well. Like, we're talking about the Pirates being ready. Pirates have been in a rebuild for a decade. And now that's
Yeah.
not all Charrington, but the last 4 or 5 years have been. Like, when does the rebuild start to not be a rebuild anymore? And if we're talking about teams to make the leap next year, like, I think you mentioned the Pirates more just because of the pitching.
Yes.
The offense, like, how do we not really have anybody on offense? Like, I mean, O'Neal Cruz is great. Like, Brian Reynolds is great. After that, so
Gets,
I
gets,
wanted to bring that to you. Like, do you think that they're on the hot seat, or is this just the plan? Because what I'm here to tell you and why I'm not very good at this is that I don't love the plan. I don't.
yeah. He saved himself on the Henry Davis pick by using the savings to get Bubba Chandler.
True.
So that definitely helped. But still, I mean, you have the number one pick. Like you got cute
Yeah.
with it, and it didn't work out there. Um, I the Ryan Hayes extension is aging terribly. Um, they're he seems to have built a stable of really good arms, and their pitching prospects are insane. They've got plenty of other arms too that are really intriguing. But just the offensive side of things has been a total struggle. I think Shelton could be gone, but I think from the front office perspective, and I might be wrong here, I think you got to give Charrington one more year, especially with the rotation that they've kind of cultivated here now. Like give him one more year to try to piece together the offense and then go. But if it doesn't go well next year, I do think that then he's very much on the hot seat because how much more patience can he have? But Nutting doesn't give him any money to spend.
Yes.
So that part makes it difficult.
Really
He's pieced
difficult.
together a low budget rotation in terms of just homegrown talent, but you can't do it's so hard to do both. I think you got to give him one off season here, give him a little bit of opportunity to spend a little bit. And if they can, add a couple decent pieces and have a decent year, I think he's got to get one more year before I fully put him on the hot seat. But who knows? Like if he gets dismissed, it wouldn't shock me. But I think he's got to get one more year.
I just feel like there are plenty of GMs who, the Pirates are one of the lowest in payroll in Major League Baseball, but there's some teams that are also really, really low in baseball that have low in payroll that have been doing well, right? And the Pirates perpetually
Been a
have
long
been
time.
in last, perpetually. And now they have Paul Skeens. And personally, this is a take that I don't know how well it's going to age, but I'm going to say it. I think Jared Jones is a little overrated.
Oh,
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Like, I'm not ready to start putting him in like, oh, Paul Skeens category, like Skeens and
thank
Jones.
goodness you
Like,
saved that for when Jack's not on the episode.
I know, because he would have railed
He
me.
would have
So
freaked
I'm
out.
telling you, don't tell Jack. All right,
We'll
nobody,
keep it between us.
everybody on the listening, audio, video, don't tell Jack.
Don't tell Jack.
That could also be very, very wrong. I just look at a guy who's two pitches.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I can understand that. I think if that's your three and Keller's your two, or vice versa, or whatever, you're in a pretty good
Keller
spot.
hasn't been that good. Keller hasn't been that good.
He's fine. He's fine. I still, I mean, Bubba Chandler is going to be a dog. I have all the confidence in the world. He's crazy. So I think you got to give him one more offseason. Like I'm looking at like a Ross Atkins. Like that guy's got to be gone tomorrow.
Gone.
Like gone. Get rid of it. Done. Farhan should be gone, but he
Schneider
won't be.
too. Take Schneider out of the manager role too.
Take them all. Take everyone. Like gone. The fact that the team is better when they fully just liquidated it and put up young guys shows you like this is the team you didn't try to build. This is the result of your team sucking and you liquidating and bringing guys up and you've been better. Like that always, I think, tells you, everything you need to know also from buy-in from vets and also just the team that you put together. Everyone needs to go there without a doubt for me. And then Farhan should be gone, but signed through 2026 or whatever. The Giants are bizarre. I have no idea. The one that really should, and I don't know if it's going to be a similar Farhan type of situation. How much more leeway are we going to give John Mozeliak? And it's not just the fact that they continue to struggle and underachieve, and they've spent, right? Like it's the fact that everybody and their moms knows what's going on and like where they're deficient. And yeah, Sonny Gray was a nice addition, but like still continue to be deficient in certain areas. The way that they've ragdolled certain players and handled situations, I think have been brutal. I don't know why they were so quick to give an extension to Ali Marmol. Like, why do that now? Like, is this the guy? Now you paid him to be. I think there has to be a point in time where what John Mozeliak did shouldn't outweigh what he is doing. And right now, I still think it has. And to me, this another year of disappointment. I think he should be on the hot seat this offseason because I think from the manager situation, from the way that they've handled their players, from the way that they handled Wilson Contreras last year. Now, like, look, you let him be a catcher and he's a great one. So that was a great move for them. But like, it just, to me, a lot of it's very puzzling. And, you know, whether it's the development of some of their young guys or the roster construction in general, I think there's been a lot of faux pas from Mozeliak. And I think, you know, he should start to be put on the hot seat.
100%. One more manager that I wrote down that I think is gone after the year, Ron Washington with the Angels. Because Perry's getting extended, so it ain't Perry. But someone's got to go. And not only have the Angels been just downright terrible, Ron Washington's rhetoric, whether you agree that, you know, the old timey managers, they'd call out players, you know, I get that. I understand. But what I am telling you now is that just doesn't fly in locker rooms these days.
Not with today's players.
Not with today's players. Like, you can hate that, but you have to understand that that is a matter of fact. And the fact that he's consistently calling out guys, never taking responsibility for some of his decisions, and the team is horrible when you're worse than the A's and you got a big time payroll because you're the Angels. Like, this team is so broken in so many ways, and bringing in a manager that is calling out players and not taking responsibility is the opposite of building. So I think he's
especially
done.
when you're rushing guys up to the big leagues and like, oh, like, yeah, they're adjusting mentally, they're adjusting in a lot of different ways, and you have a manager that's probably going to throw them under the bus. Like,
Yeah.
I think the game is at least from a managerial perspective, is kind of passed Ron by a little bit. Like, I'm always going to be out on that approach. And again, maybe people say, oh, these kids need to toughen up, whatever. Maybe you're right, but the reality is they're not going to be that way. Like, they're not going to be. Most of them are not going to be receptive to that. So whether you think that they should be or not is a moot point because most players do not handle that well nowadays. So like, it just isn't conducive to success. So I mean, and even active players will tell you that. You know, so I think that's definitely a name that fits the bill, but who knows with the freaking Angels.
Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this mailbag episode. Again, I just want to thank all of you out there for asking these fantastic questions. We're always loaded up with a ton. And again, there were unbelievably great questions that were asked for today's mailbag that we're just going to make into entire episodes where we couldn't cover them in this one. So again, thank you to everybody. And we'd really, really appreciate it if you did enjoy, rate, review, 5 stars, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribing on YouTube. If you want to get yourself some Just Baseball merch, you know I'm rocking the rope hat. You can find that in the episode description. Of course, we'll be back on Thursday. For Arm Layton, I am Peter Apple. With that, thank you, everybody.